Hey City Youth, we love you so much. It's gonna be another great Tuesday night. Let's get our worship on.
Time moves in rhythm with his hand, moment by moment, beat by beat, rolling through death, both kick and snare. No rebel beat outskips his feet. Cause it might sound wild, but who on earth said our song should be tamed? Hey. Let now the music chase his heart. Mercy by mercy, note by note. We lost the pitch, he moved the score. Our wayward notes, his sweet resort. Cause it might sound wild, but wild is why my heart sings on. Sing his praise till the other side. Cause our home came all the way.
Imagine heaven.
Imagine heaven where we stand. It's not just some distant promised land. It's more than some hopeful dying dream. Watch it wind up just as he said. And when it does, we'll sing like we wish we'd known we should back then. And it might sound wild, but we don't have to wait till then. Sing, oh, sing his praise to the other side. Cause our hope came all the way. Sing my soul, sing his praise till the end of time. On the way, all out there. Let it glorify, magnify your name. Let it glorify, magnify your name. Let it glorify, magnify your name. Magnify his name. Let it glorify, magnify your name, Jesus. Oh, let it glorify, oh, magnify your name, Jesus. Let it glorify, we'll magnify your name. Only yours, Jesus. Let it glorify, magnify your name. Let it glorify, magnify. Oh, sing his praise till the other side. Cause our hope came all the way. Sing my soul, sing his praise till the end of time. All the way, a little louder there.
Hey City Youth, it's gonna be such a great message. Pastor Vlad is so amazing and he has such a good word for you. So let's settle down now and just receive this word.
Hey y'all, my name's Hunter. I'm a student leader at City Youth. Welcome back to another week of City Youth
Online.
Well, City Youth, as you can see, we have a lot of people here in the room with us today. And like you saw from the worship set, we had Nathan Berglund on the keys. What is going on? Last week we had Alex Amar on keys. This week we had Nathan Berglund. And then on Wednesday, we have a little bit of surprise of another guest person that's going to be on keys. Man, we're just throwing all of these surprises at you. But nevertheless, today, for those of you who do not know, is my birthday. Today, March 16th, is my birthday. So thank you for joining me for my birthday. What an honor. All these people joining me. We got hundreds of people here joining me for my birthday. So I feel real special. So thank you so much for joining me for my birthday. It's one of those things, for birthdays, I didn't really understand birthdays. I feel like when I was a kid, only thing I thought about when I thought birthday was presents. How many of you can relate to that? Birthdays, presents. That is 100% what I related to. And so when it comes to birthdays, when I got older and I didn't have 50 people buying me presents anymore, I had to kind of like rethink, hey, what actually happens on a birthday? What is the point of a birthday? That is not going to be the topic that I'm sharing on today, but regardless, it's an excellent question. And the thing is for me, what I realized when it came to birthdays is that it's a celebration of somebody's life. I already knew that. But a little bit deeper is that it's a celebration of somebody that you are happy or glad that they are actually in your life. Did any of you have your birthday recently?
I did.
You did? What day was it?
February 7th.
February 7th? And then anyone else who has an upcoming birthday soon? When is your birthday?
May 24th.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we got May 24th for Aiden. Hey, that is my anniversary. I got married on May 24th.
Special.
Wow, that is a special moment. That is a special moment. But regardless, thank you so much for jumping in, tuning in, sitting in to another week of City Youth Online. So we're gonna dive into actually my favorite verse because it's my birthday. I can kind of do whatever I want. So we're gonna talk about my favorite verse in the Bible, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of a backstory on this verse, and then I'll kind of share about it. And so I grew up going to Christian school my entire life. There's only 2 years of my entire, from like preschool to graduating high school, only 2 of those years that I actually spent in a public school. And let me tell you what, every time I was in a public school, I loved it because all the Christian schools I went to were like academies. So they were a lot more difficult, and we were always like taking way more difficult classes. There's a higher standard and expectation, and we had to wear uniforms. So like every single time I was in a public school, I loved it because I wore whatever I wanted to wear, and it was just great. I loved it. But in second grade, when I was at one of these schools, I had every single Christian school, usually they make you memorize a verse. Usually in Bible class, there's some sort of thing where it makes you memorize a verse of some sort. How many of you, we got a few people in the room here today. You saw them on there, but I'm gonna introduce them real quick. We got Jared over here, we got Josh, we got Reagan, we got Hunter, we got Aiden, and we got Wyatt. Yes. All up in the room. Yes. But how many of you have gone to a Christian school before? Or how many of you, better question, you've had to memorize verses? Like somebody told you to memorize verses and you've had to do that. Some of you?
Yeah, every Friday, every week we had to memorize it, and it was like for a test.
Kindergarten to 5th grade.
Preschool.
Wow.
Kindergarten through 8th grade for me.
Dang.
Kindergarten through 4th.
So what you're saying is that you probably already know the whole entire Bible and all those verses, huh? You still remember all of them?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. See, I kind of connect a little bit more with Jared there. I do not, and I did not remember any verses. And so when I was in second grade, the craziest thing happened. There was a verse that I memorized, and I've never forgotten it since. And it wasn't like any crazy big verse. Like it wasn't a verse that for me was like, wow, like I love this verse. It was just another verse alongside all the verses that I had to memorize. And the verse, just for some reason, it just stuck with me so much, and I didn't really understand why, because other verses, I could literally memorize a verse and then recite it from my grade, and then literally the next day, I could not remember it at all. So I don't know if you've had that happen before. I've had that happen so many times. It's like I memorized this whole verse, I studied it, I ace it, next day it's gone. I don't remember it, I can't recall it. Where was it even written? Who knows? I did not remember it. But for some weird reason, this verse stuck with me for the rest of my life. And so the verse is Matthew 5, verse 16. And it simply states this. It says, "In the same way, let your light shine before all men, so that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." And I mean, you might hear this verse and you might think, okay, it's just another verse. It's a simple verse. But for me, for some reason, it just stuck with me. Again, it was nothing special, wasn't anything crazy. And I remember I was already in 6th grade and I could not get this verse. I mean, it's not that I was trying to forget the verse, but I just couldn't forget it. Like, it just was always coming back into my mind. And I remember talking to my mom about it. And I was like, Mom, what is going on? Why can't I just remember this verse all the time? And it's funny how we think like parents always have the right answer. I bet you when I asked my mom that, she was like, I don't know. Why are you asking me? But she, in her wisdom, just was like, I don't know. Let's think about it real quick. And she just kind of thought about it. She's like, let's just pray. Let's ask God. Like, why do you still remember this verse? Out of all the verses, why this one? And I remember my mom and I were just there and we were kind of praying. And honestly, I was probably falling asleep. I was not paying attention. She was like, we're going to pray. And I was like, here we go again. How long is it going to be this time? Those of you who don't know, my parents would set up prayer nights that started at night. And when I say that they started at night, I don't mean that they started at like 6 p.m. or something like that. They started at 10 p.m. And so families would come over and we would start praying at 10 and we would pray through the entire night. I mean, like start at 10 and finish at 7 in the morning type deal. So my parents would pray a lot. And the reason for that, I mean, they grew up in the USSR in the Russian regime. And in that regime, it was essentially illegal to be a Christian. Like they pushed atheism on people. They got rid of Bibles. They would take away pastors. Like there was craziness that would go on in these in the churches there. There's a lot of persecution. And so they really had to depend on God a lot. And so when they didn't know what to do, they prayed. And I think Wyatt, you had mentioned in one of our student leaders meetings how like when something was going on at your home that you just didn't know what was happening, your first instinct was to pray. And that's such a good instinct because whenever we don't know what to do, instead of us just trying to fake it and just try to make it happen on our own and pretend like we know, the best thing we could ever do is just stop and pray. And so my family loved to pray. I mean, my dad would tell us stories how like, oh, I was waiting for God to give me an answer, so I just prayed really quick. It was just a couple hours, and then I felt like God gave me the answer. I'm like, really quick and a couple hours, those do not go together, Dad. I don't know if you understand that, but really quick and a little bit, like in a few hours is not the same thing. But it was a really quick prayer, actually. It was really short. We prayed it for a few minutes, and my mom was like, I think that verse has something to do with the way you're going to live your life. I think it has something to do with your calling. I feel like God is just saying that verse is going to be a part of your calling and who you're meant to be. And it was so interesting because I didn't actually get to know the rest of that passage until later in life. And I thought that it was always just that part of the verse. But really, if you continue to read in chapter 5 of Matthew, it talks about how when you light a candle, or in our situation, if you light a light bulb in a room, you're not going to put the light bulb in the corner and then cover it with a basket every time you need light. You know what I mean? Like if you need light in a room, you're going to put it up on a stand, you're going to put it in the ceiling, you're going to put it in a position so it can shine the light the best. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, we got one yeah. Everybody else was like, I guess. I've never installed lights. Actually, Jared, you do install stuff like that. You have installed, have you installed bucket lights in ceilings?
Yes.
I might need you to come over to my apartment and install me some because we need some more light. Could you do that?
Yeah.
Easy?
Easy.
We already have the provisions there and everything.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm excited. I'm going to get some light in my apartment. Let's go. Anyway, I don't know what Josh said, but that's literally what it sounded like. It was just deep, bassy, like deep voice. That's all I could hear. No, it's funny because Tobias, who here knows who Tobias is? So Tobias, he does not know how to whisper. Tobias, I love you, but you do not know how to whisper. You do not. We're sitting there in prayer, and as you're in the back, I'm like, what is happening? Who is talking right now? And I'm like, I'm at the front of the sanctuary. Who's talking so loud that I could hear you all the way from the front? And I'm like texting people in the back. I'm like, who's talking? And YG, out of all people, some of you have met YG. He's like, it's Tobias. I'm like, tell Tobias to stop talking. He needs to learn how to whisper. But either way, you have a deep bassy voice. I wish I had the deep bassy voice. My voice is not deep and bassy, even though this microphone might deceive you. Those of you who are watching at home. Anyway. Back to the verse. So the verse continues and talks about how when you light a light in a room, if you have a light, you're not going to put it under a basket or try to hide it and cover it. You're going to put it in a position so that it can shine the light the best in the room. And so what this passage talks about is that we as individuals who are believers that believe in Jesus, when we walk through life, we have the opportunity to be like a lamp or a light that's covered, or we can allow God to position us in the best way so that the light that we have walking in Jesus could hit and impact the most amount of people. So some of you have heard the analogy of like if you're in a dark room and you turn on a light switch, the battle between light and darkness is so easily seen, like who wins. Light wins every time. You turn on a light, the entire room floods with light immediately. And the only thing that still has darkness in it is what's in the shadows. But even then, it's not as dark. And so the same way goes in your life when you go into your schools, when you're wherever you go in life, you're in a grocery store, you're in a parking lot, wherever it is that you are in life, when you allow God to position you in the best way in that environment, you actually will begin to see how things that used to be dark and evil, that darkness cannot stay if you allow yourself to shine your light. And I didn't realize what I was asking God when I prayed this prayer. But my mom was like, hey, let's just pray that God positions you in places in life where you can shine that light the most and the best. I don't know if you've seen, so there's like those, sometimes there's movies with like vampires in them and they like turn on the lights or they open the shade like, and they kind of are like that or something like that. It's so funny because I didn't realize that when I prayed that prayer, that I was actually going to be positioning myself to oppose darkness in the world. Like I knew it in my head, but I didn't realize I was actually going against darkness in the world. And so that's really the role of our lives, that when we live our lives and we actually let our light shine in the best way in our schools, in our neighborhoods, and God's the only one that can give you direction on what that needs to look like, but you're going against the kingdom of darkness. That's what you're doing. And there comes resistance. Just like those vampires, there are demons that will cower and fear and will be upset about the fact that you are actually now shining your light. And I mean, I didn't realize what that was going to mean and what that was going to look like. But for me, that actually meant that I was going to need to stand up and say something in moments where no one else was willing to say something or stand up for God. And really, there was moments where I felt like, I'm sure you remember the story of David and Goliath, where David is staying there in front of Goliath and confronting him. And he's like, who do you think you are talking about my God like this? Like, you ungodly Philistine. And he was not about to let this guy talk poorly about God. Even though he seemed bigger than him, he knew that he had a God that was way bigger than Goliath could ever be. And so I love that image. And really in my life, that's what it kind of felt like it was like. I felt like I was like the smallest guy, the least qualified, if you might say, in the midst of an army of people that could totally step up and rise up and say something and people would actually listen. But yet I seem to be the only consistent one to actually stand up and say something. And I mean, there was plenty of mistakes I made along the way. There was plenty of times where I addressed things and I corrected people in an incorrect way. I'll never forget, I corrected a pastor actually. I was in 7th grade, and at this church, the thinking when it came to participating in communion. So who here has done communion? You all probably have done the communion, the wine, and it's just juice, and then the little wafer. In Russian culture, in Russian churches, some of them, they believe that in order for you to participate in communion, you must be water baptized in that church. So even if you were baptized in another church, they think you need to be baptized in this church, or some churches will say you just need to be baptized. Otherwise, you cannot participate in communion. And so I remember one of my friends, his name is actually exactly like mine. So my nickname when I was growing up was Vova, but pronounced with a Russian accent, it's Vova. And then my friend's name was Vova. And so we're both Vova, and we became friends, and it was kind of cool. And we both actually started to kind of dig into the Bible a little bit because we were just curious. We both were like, man, our parents are Christians. This is everything. And so it's like, what are we actually believing? What is this Bible that we actually are saying yes to in this church that we're going to? We decided that we weren't going to allow it just to be the same old, same old. And so one of the times we were like, well, we read about it basically in Romans, it talks about how everybody can participate in communion. The Bible talks about that. It says that it should not be something that's lighthearted, that you shouldn't take it for granted and mock it, but anyone can participate. There's no list of requirements in order for you to participate in communion, because communion is just remembering what Jesus did for you on the cross. And so anyway, so we decided to stand up for communion, because if you could take communion, you would stand up, everybody else would sit down, and then they would walk around with like the juice and the bread and all that. And so the guy who was bringing it, walking by with it, he literally walks right past us. And I was like kind of upset. I was like, what's going on? I kind of started getting loud. And I saw my mom in the corner. She kind of looked at, she's like told me basically to calm down because I was kind of getting loud. She didn't want me to embarrass her in front of the whole church, which I have done. But in that moment, I remember I was like, man, what is going on here? And then out of nowhere, I literally get grabbed by the ear, and my friend gets grabbed by the arm by one of the people that were like a deacon at the church, and they drag us out of the sanctuary, literally by my ear, dragging me out of the sanctuary. And I mean, if that happened in a church today, that's not gonna fly. Somebody's gonna get sued, and it's gonna be really bad. Russian church, it's like, it was a very different story. You could pretty much get spanked by the Sunday school teacher and it was okay. But I get dragged out, and this guy's like, how dare you stand up? Do you not understand? He just starts like laying it into us. I remember in that moment seeing my friend Vova that I was growing up with. I saw how this confrontation, it turned him so far, like it made him so bitter towards that guy and towards everything. Cause we talked about it afterward, and he's like, man, if this is what Christianity is like, I don't want anything to do with it, because that's not the Jesus I read about when I read the Bible, and this does not seem like that same Jesus. And actually, it pushed him away completely. But I got so mad that happened. I felt like I needed to stand up for something. So I literally went into the pastor's office after the church service, and I just started telling him how like everything that I was like, this is not okay, blah, blah, blah. And I just started laying into him and giving him scripture after scripture. And he was like, well, who do you think you are? You're some kid. And he was just like telling me like to get out of his office, essentially. And I told him, I was like, hey, if you don't take this and my parents have to come into here, I was like, then we're probably gonna leave the church. And he was like, yeah, okay, like as if I have that kind of pull, which I didn't. I was 100% bluffing. But he called my parents in because he wanted to correct me. And my parents actually stood up for me in that moment. And we actually left the church. And it was crazy, and it was not right. I'm gonna say that right now, and I'll make it clear. It was not right that I did it that way because I was angry. I was genuinely mad. And I allowed my anger to dictate, because what if my heart posture shifted from me being angry at that guy for doing that to actually being like, maybe he actually doesn't know. Maybe this deacon actually just doesn't know that communion is available for everyone. And he's just doing what he knows. And so because of my anger, my family left that church, and actually a few other families left that church. And just because I was angry. And so it was not okay. But the point was that I felt this need, and I learned a lot of lessons along the way. But I learned that for me, when I prayed that prayer and I said yes to God, and I said yes, like I'm going to live a life as a light to all people, so that people could see how I live my life and they say yes to Jesus. I didn't realize what that meant. But something that I need all of you to realize is that that is the same exact calling that all of you are called to. And that it's not something that just when you're at church, or just when I'm around, or just when your leader's around. That is something that God challenges us to do when no one that knows us, no one that believes the same thing as us is around. Because it's a challenge to be a light in darkness. But if you're just being a light when everyone else around you is already being a light, then what's the point? If when it's a moment of darkness that you just cover up your light and you hide it. What the Bible is asking us and challenging us to do is to actually be a light everywhere we go. And guess what that does? If you're a light everywhere you go, now the people that maybe they feel like there's no one standing up for them, or they feel forgotten or whatever, you're actually bringing them hope and light in a place where they feel like they're stuck in something and they simply can't get out. And I've shared this story before, but I'll never forget it, where my friend, it wasn't my friend at the time, but it was at a camp retreat thing, and I was totally scared, but God challenged me to say something in one of those moments where it's like, no one's talking. The youth pastor's like, hey, I think that there's somebody who needs to share something, and like no one's saying anything. And I felt like God was like, you're the one that needs to say something. And I had no idea what I was going to say, but I ended up just sharing a little story from the Bible, totally freaked out, but shared it. And then one of the guys that was on the trip that was in my class came up to me afterward, and he was like, hey, no one knows this, but tomorrow I was actually going to go out into the lake and go where there was the thickest seaweed, and I was going to flip my canoe and actually commit suicide. I was going to take my own life, and I was going to go there and flip my canoe. And he's like, but because what you shared, I felt like God said that he still sees me and he has not forgotten me. And what I want to challenge you is that first off, God has not forgotten you. Whoever you are, wherever you're watching, God has not forgotten you. And he loves you so, so much. And to understand that his love is not conditional. He doesn't just love you at one time because you're at your best. The Bible is very clear in the book of Romans when it says that he loved us while we were still sinners. He didn't love us when we'd said everything correctly and did everything perfectly. Jesus actually loved us when we were at our very worst. And so don't forget that. Don't forget that Jesus loves you at your worst. And so if you're living your life and you're constantly trying to change something or fix something, stop. That's not what Jesus died for. He didn't die for you to try to constantly fix something before you could come to him. He died for you so that you could come to him and that he could be the light in your life and he could bring that healing into your heart. And so for those of you who are living life and you might say like, Vlad, I don't really know how to be that light. I feel like every time I do that, almost like people try to snuff out my light. And guess what? That's actually what the enemy tries to do. The enemy tries to snuff out that light in you. He's the one that tries to break that, to try to block that. He's the one that tries to make you think that you can't say something because guess what? The darkness has no power. Remember, it's like a light switch. So if you're shining your light, the enemy just wants you to believe that you don't have the power. He wants you to think that you're being snuffed out. That's what his strategy is the entire time. But remember, it's no competition. The Bible actually says that he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. And so I want to challenge you to live life boldly in that way. Live your life boldly where it's like, I'm not going to settle for different things. I'm going to live my life being an example and being a light in the darkest and the most miserable places. And so, City Youth, I love all of you. I hope you have a great day. Thank you for celebrating my birthday with me here today. Do not forget that next week, the 23rd, we are having our in-person service here at the church. So make sure to tell your friends about it. Show up. It's going to be fantastic. I love you all. See you all in person on Tuesday. Peace out.